And we're still talking about the mega-brothel paradise in Germany. Legal mega-brothel, which was on the news for years for being exemplary, good business, clean rooms, women who enjoy what they're doing. And then in 2016 was busted for human trafficking, and we found out that the whole brothel operated on the back of trafficked women this entire time. And we're looking at a piece of TV that came out when the brothel first opened to look at how did the media present it, how did politicians frame it. And yeah, we're right in the middle of the video. I'll be responding to whatever comes next, which I haven't seen, so it's gonna be a surprise for me too.
Achim reist durch halb Deutschland, von Club zu Club.
Perfekt.
Seine Schuhe gibt es nicht im Laden zu kaufen.
Okay, so there's this guy whose entire business is just going around Germany selling these feet-destroying high heels to women in the sex trade. You gotta understand, there's like a whole shadow business, legal, but still shadow in the sense that it's limited to this industry. And I mean, this brothel got busted for trafficking, so it's not unfair for me to say if that's your business, you're interacting with a lot of dubious people. But yeah, I think we often forget about these kinds of third-party profiteers. I call them sort of the leeches on the sex industry. And a lot of the money that women make goes into maintaining, like getting these kinds of shoes, getting the kind of gear that's expected. That's where, yeah, a lot of money gets burned.
Ja, ich finde sie super. Das sind Spezialschuhe, sozusagen Arbeitsschuhe.
This grin of his, like, we know he doesn't really believe what he's saying himself. I mean.
Lassen sich dann auch von der Steuer absetzen.
Lassen sich auch von der Steuer absetzen. Also ich habe oftmals Mädels, die dann Quittungen verlangen, um die dann bei der Steuer geltend zu machen.
50, oder? Wie bei dir?
Zwischen 50 und 80.
Ach so.
See, everything's fine. The women are getting back the money they spent on the shoes. The money isn't being burned. Yeah, right. All this infrastructure. People often say this. Look, these women, they interact with so many people. They interact with the brothel owner. They interact with the madam. They interact with the cashier at the entrance who takes the money from the Johns. They interact with the cooks. They interact with this guy, the salesman. Surely this prevents trafficking, right? This prevents abuse. This prevents, addicted women being on the premises. Because, like, how could trafficking go undetected with so many people? And yeah, clearly it can, because they either still don't see it, or they don't want to, or they are part of the business. Without human trafficking, they too wouldn't be making that much money.
Und den habe ich aber nur in großen Größen, den habe ich nur in 40.
Und den, in was für Größen alles oder welche Farben?
Frauen und Schuhe, ne?
Ja. This is really depressing.
Frauen und Schuhe, was denkst du, was dein Freund sagen wird? Nicht zu den Schuhen, sondern zu deinem Job.
Wenn er es erfährt. Ich nehme an, nichts Positives.
Because that's the situation we're in Germany. Like, if I tell a guy, look, like your friend or some guy he goes to the brothel, men are going to find all kinds of defenses as why to. That's okay. But if a guy finds out his girlfriend or some woman he knows is selling sex, oh my god, then it's still a big scandal. About 12 years after liberalization, when the government gave the official stamp to the industry saying it's work, I mean, that's not a lot of time, to be fair, for a huge cultural change, but still, we're now 20 years after the law, and no woman who speaks publicly and says, I was or am in prostitution has an easy time. Like, the stigma is alive and well, and there are also these men who get into relationships with women and they kind of think it's kind of cool or kinky to date a woman in the sex trade, but women tell me the moment that you have an argument with that kind of guy, he's going to throw it in your face. He might fetishize you for it. He might think that because you're in the sex trade, he can like have sex with you anytime because you're an nymphomaniac, right? Or he can do whatever sexual practice he's into and you'll do it, right? Because that's what you learn at your job, right? You're going to be a pro at that and you're going to be open for anything. There's a lot of men who are straight up like, I would never date a woman in the sex trade. And I'm not saying all of them do it out of some false sense of stigma. I think it's perfectly legitimate to say I don't want my partner to have sex with other people, or I would be really worried about my partner, about her safety and her well-being, therefore I couldn't date a woman in prostitution. But yeah, there's the people not dating her because they just think she's a gross, disgusting hooker. And also the men who are into that, but for whom it is, creepy. Yeah, it's dating while you're in the sex trade is actually not uncommon, but it's difficult. Editing this, I'm not entirely sure if I was fair in my answer. There's a variety of reasons why a woman might not tell her partner that she's in prostitution. If she, for example, is in a violent relationship and she's afraid of violence, but would she then go on TV with her face, knowing he might see it? That's unlikely. So I don't know what's going on there, but I think if you found out that your partner was secretly in prostitution and having sex with other people for money, you'd have good reason to be really hurt and angry. It'd be hypocritical of me to say that prostitution is not a job and therefore these sexual interactions mean something for everyone involved, and then to say, but the boyfriend at home has to treat it like a non-event. No, certainly not. That's not what I'm trying to say. The knee-jerk reaction of most people would be to feel like you were serially cheated on, before they may also consider additional aspects, like worrying about the safety of their partner or something. And I think some people like to view the anger or the hurt that she might incur from that boyfriend to just be horophobia, but I don't think that's fair.
Es könnte sogar durchaus passieren, dass dadurch die Beziehung halt beendet wird oder ja. Begeistert wird er nicht sein, sicherlich nicht.
16 Mädchen kommen noch.
And here they said girls, which it's ladies or girls. Take from that what you will.
Der Chef will wissen, wo die Mädchen alle sind. Im Club sind Gäste, aber kaum eine der Damen.
And they like to call the Johns guests, right? Because you're a wellness club and like guests at a hotel, nice atmosphere. We're all a family here. Ugh, I hate that word. Yeah.
Sind es die von gestern? Sind, wann sie anfangen, wann sie ausgecheckt haben, ob sie da sind.
Auch wenn die Mädchen selbstständig sind, kommen und gehen können, wann sie wollen. Das geht natürlich nicht, schimpft Jürgen Rudloff. Die können doch nicht alle auf einmal Schuhe kaufen.
So, like, now there's a lack of women, and that happens a lot where the Johns review the brothel and they say, oh, there was a lack of women, like, there wasn't enough to go around. And that's the moment where, like, he has to, like, we see the mega pimp has to propel women to come out of their rooms even if they don't want to. And, well, we'll just see who's strapped for cash enough, or as we know, I'm not speculating, some of the women were trafficked and they didn't straight up have to go whenever he calls, right? I completely forgot, but there was this case that happened in this brothel not that long ago. Like, we were speaking of guests. I'm just going to say it now because I might forget later, because it's not going to be in this piece. A few years ago, there was a John who spent a lot of money on a woman in this brothel, a woman from Romania, and like a 4-figure in total. And when she didn't want to see him anymore because he was creepy and demanding and probably raping her, he got so mad, he shot her to death outside the brothel. I can't believe I forgot about this. Like, there's just so many cases of violence associated with this brothel. They're just coming to me now as I'm watching, I'm remembering. So one of these wonderful guests happened to fall in love with one of the women, which is really, you know, paying so much money that he thinks at some point she owes him, he owns her, and then killing her. We heard it earlier, a lot of these men are well-to-do, they got money, they're businessmen, etc. A lot of them are married with kids, as was this guy who shot to death this woman outside the Paradise Brothel and then himself. So while guests give this idea of, you know, relaxation and sort of temporary stay, there's some who do come back like routinely and who do go see the same woman. And while that gives a little bit bit of temporary financial stability to her, a man like that who spends a lot of money, as I just told you, he can become extremely demanding. He can become violent, like an abusive boyfriend. That can even turn lethal. And we know that the money aspect was one of the things that he used as an excuse, right? We know that he complained to other men about the paying part. That's why she owed him, and that's why it was okay to murder her. I mean, if I dig some more, I could probably find more fucked up stuff about this brothel that we don't get to see here. That's just something that just came back to me, and I'm kind of amazed. I just forgot about the murder that happened right outside the brothel, like right in front on the street. Yeah.
Schlechte, der hat gerade schon gefragt, wo die ganzen Frauen sind.
Ja.
Oh. Ne, Achel?
Ja.
Die sind doch süß. Du hast mich wieder mal.
Perfekt.
Chanel, wie kann man in solchen Schuhen laufen?
Also die ersten paar Stunden geht's.
And then it really, really hurts. That's one of the things that a survivor from New Zealand, Sabrina Valise, talked about in her statement. She's like, even before you go to the room, like she says, like, I don't talk about what happens in the room. I'm just telling you all the stuff that happens before you get to the room, which is, I think, what we're going to see now. There's this area where men congregate and they check out the women and they decide who to pick. And you're there in barely any clothes or no clothes, and on these terrible heels. And the room temperature is set for the guys who are somewhat clothed, as we know. So you're often like too cold. And so to make yourself warm, you get up on your high heels and you start walking around. But then your feet hurt so much you sit down again. So you're constantly uncomfortable going from walking around to being cold to walking around to being in pain. And then these guests come in and they look around and they're like, maybe they want to test the piece before they drive it. So they might feel her up. They might, get too close. They talk to her like, oh, so what can I get with you? Do you do anal? Hello, do you do anal? Isn't that a wonderful first encounter with a person? If that happened in any other job, any of that stuff, it'd be sexual harassment. It'd be grounds for barring that customer from the establishment. In prostitution, that's your everyday initial encounter with a John. We're also going to see like the men buy women drinks. That's another way I think the women can earn some extra money. That's how it is in a lot of brothels. And that incentivizes them to drink. If you're really drunk, you can't consent, which is not that rare. And also, it just encourages alcoholism. It encourages you to keep upping your tolerance because you're going to make more money that way. And that's really damaging for your health. Makes it even harder for her to sort of, stay in control is too generous a term because when you're alone in a room with this guy, and like I said in another episode, they do not lock the doors because there is a realistic scenario that she's going to have to come running out of that if it escalates, if he becomes violent. So we'll see if how far it goes, how much of that journey of the customer, the guest, they take us through.
Statt das 10. Paar Schuhe zu kaufen, sollten die Mädels besser in eine Altersvorsorge investieren, meint Rudloff.
Asshole. The pimp tells the women, please invest in your old age. They're all independent contractors, so unless they're taking care of those kinds of payments, they have additional insurance that invests in, called retirement money, then they're not going to have any. So it's all up to the women. And if she ends up mismanaging the money, which we already talked about the many reasons why she might, if she even has enough that she could squander the savings, then it's all her fault, right? Haha. Let's blame women for coming out of prostitution broke, which they actually do all the time.
Die Versicherungen jedenfalls stehen parat für diese neue, lukrative Klientel.
Und ich finde halt einfach die Altersversorgung ein ganz, ganz wichtiger Punkt für diese Frauen. Das sind zum Teil auch in jungen Jahren, Anfang 20, ja. Manche natürlich auch älter, Mitte 30, Ende 30, aber speziell die jüngeren Damen, wo sie noch überhaupt keine Gedanken über Altersversorgung machen.
It's just amazing, right? Here's a now convicted human trafficker lecturing us about how women need to take care of their old age. I wonder if he's out of prison now, actually, or if he still has a few more years to go. He probably has plenty of money saved for his old age that he earned off the backs of those, many of them trafficked women. I don't know how his financial situation is, how much the authorities took away from him when he was convicted. But yeah, I hope a lot. But yeah, you know how he says older women are those who are in their 30s, mid and late 30s, because Johns are such, yeah, I mean, they're not looking to date women their own age. The Johns on average are going to be like late 40s and 50s. And the women are going to be 10 plus years younger. Quite often a John calls the brothel and asks, what's the youngest one you have? Yeah, just to admit it to that. Just in case it wasn't gross enough so far.
Dass dieses Thema ist, und das habe ich mir wirklich als Aufgabe auch genommen. Und Sie werden sehen, Mitte des Jahres gehen wir eigentlich mit diesem Produkt auf den Markt bundesweit. Ja?
Haben Sie dann auch was von dem Produkt?
In erster Linie eigentlich die Versicherungsgesellschaften sicherlich. Ich bin eigentlich nur das Bindeglied zu den Versicherungen.
Da sind Sie einfach so ein Mensch, so ein Lieber.
Alles hat mit lieber Mensch eigentlich weniger zu tun, sondern Einstellungssache. Ich finde, ja, da müssen wir jetzt in die Tiefe natürlich gehen, aber letztendlich weiß ich, dass die Frauen hier drinnen einen harten Job machen.
Right, he does a pretty good spiel, right? He doesn't say all the women love it and this is the best place ever. He says things that are somewhat more palatable. He says, right, they've told us so far prostitution is inevitable. It's not necessarily great, but we're giving women the best possible conditions. That's the narrative. And by walking that sort of careful line, it's like this fake authenticity, right? Where he's like, I'm not saying like I'm some kind of good Samaritan just looking out for my girls. I'm just saying like this is what any employer would do. Like I'm not better or worse than any other employer who balances the well-being of his employees with the and satisfaction of the customers with his bottom line and carefully considers all. He doesn't lay it on too thick, and he's so softly spoken at the same time. And I just want you to understand that this man knowingly profited for over a decade of trafficking, where the criminal gangs he worked with, the way that they would intimidate women is they would randomly rock up to the brothel, take all the women in a car, drive them to a forest, and beat them up. And put tattoos on them to mark them and those kinds of things that traffickers do. And at the end of this series, I'm going to give you a detailed rundown of what actually happened in this brothel, what you don't get to see here. But yeah, I'm just going to inject it here and there to remind you if any of what he's saying is fooling you.
Am nächsten Morgen ähnelt der Club einer Baustelle. Die Schreiner von Innenausstatter Dietmar Friebe sind seit 6 Uhr da, bauen ein paar zusätzliche Türen ein, bessern aus und reparieren, was die ersten Wochen nicht überstanden hat.
Und zeitlicher Ablauf. 11 Uhr machen wir ja auf.
Kein Problem.
Schaffen Sie das, Herr Friebe?
Selbstverständlich. Wir müssen das schaffen.
Da sieht es aber schon noch aus so. Kriegen Sie das echt hin?
Es schaut auch bis 5 Minuten vor 11 Uhr so aus. Aber dann um 11 Uhr ist alles weg.
We're just like any business. We got a tight schedule. We got to do repairs. We're a new business. Things are still a little bit messy. Just like any other job, right? They show you the kinks in the system, supposedly, to normalize it. And it worked swimmingly well until the conviction for profiting off of systematic serial rape of who knows how many victims.
Ja, lass uns mal überraschen, okay?
Mitten in diesem Chaos besichtigt der Bruder von Boxweltmeister Firat Arslan den Club.
So there's a bunch of celebrities in Germany who quite happily associate with the sex trade, who associate with brothel owners, and this is nothing new. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Yeah, and that's really great advertisement for you if you can say we got this boxer, this rapper, this musician, this whoever who openly comes to the establishment. Yeah, that's how deep it goes. Just a brotherhood between politicians, pimps, celebrities. Yeah, I mean, sex work is work, #feminism, right?
Der Chef persönlich führt durchs Haus.
Wir gehen jetzt quasi, ich bin jetzt Frau 100, lauf die mit ihm hier hoch.
Und dann ist es 11 Uhr. Die ersten Mädchen sind da und die Schreiner sind noch nicht fertig.
Ich habe ja früh gesagt, Das muss nicht ganz schaffen und
The idea just came to me. Can you imagine undercover boss in a brothel? I mean, that would only work with a female pimp. If there's someone anonymous to the women in it, in the organizing hierarchy of the brothel. Yeah, obviously not possible here because he himself is present in the brothel the whole time, which is why he at the end couldn't claim that he didn't see the exploitation and the criminal gangs, etc. Yeah, it's too bad that with prostitution, he like can't go and sell his own ass for a bit to find out what it's really like.
ja, genau. Höhere Gewalt.
Ja, wie immer.
Lassen Sie noch was sein? Mineralwasser?
Tanja hat heute Frühschicht. Sie steht seit der Eröffnung des Clubs hinter der Bar. Jürgen Rudloff hat sie aus einem Stuttgarter Innenlokal abgeworben. Das hier ist ihre allererste Berührung mit dem Milieu. Wie das war, als sie hier anfing zu arbeiten, das erzählt sie Tamara, die nicht erkannt werden möchte.
Ich bin hier rein wie ein Häufchen Elend, weil ich kannte niemand. Für mich war es eine ganz, ganz neue Welt. Ich habe mir das ganz anders vorgestellt. Ich dachte, oh je, ja, Huren. Man hat draußen ein ganz anderes Bild davon. Man sieht es nicht als normale Menschen. Dann denken sich so viele Männer und es geht nur um Sex. Und ja.
Ist es so?
Nein. Nein.
Viele Männer sind eigentlich dankbar, wenn sie eine Frau berühren dürfen.
The survivors that I've spoken to say that many of them spent like almost a decade in the sex trade, and they say during that time I met hundreds or thousands of men, and out of those there were maybe 2 or 3 who wanted to just talk. And I'm talking about women who've been in escorting, the streets, and also a brothel. Like, to suggest that that's common, and if you end up working in a sauna club, that's the euphemism for these brothels, that maybe a third of the guys sort of just want to cuddle and talk, when instead you're going to have a lot of conversations about, can he ejaculate on your face, in your mouth, on your belly, or inside your anus or vagina. They're happy to show naked bodies on TV, but they're not going to be talking about like the sexual practices or the really creepy, abusive, awful stuff that became more and more normalized post-liberalization. Because we want sexy TV, but we don't want to be that explicit, because at that moment it's no longer a good advertisement. That moment maybe some people will be grossed out. I think I did misunderstand what she was trying to say a little bit. I think what she was trying to say is that there are a lot of men who come into that brothel, they sit down, they have drinks, they talk to their mates, and they just want to feel, you know, kingly, or like they have a harem. So they'll have the women about them, draped about them, talk to them, maybe just fondle them a bit, and not ever take her to a room. And this does not make it any less misogynistic, in my opinion. If you wanted to hang around women, then you could go date, you could go to a club and consensually dance with someone. I think this is still misogynistic. And second of all, it's also a bad business model for these women. This is basically work that they have to do for free. They have to pretend to be entertained by these men. Oh, they're so funny, or they're so handsome. And then they don't actually get paid for that. We learned in the first episode that the women pay an entrance fee, you know, to get their towels cleaned, etc., for the rooms when they come in. So they start in debt. And they only get actually paid when they manage to get him to go to a room. So we also have these reports from a number of brothels where men say the women are so aggressive, they come onto you so hard. They're really, really trying to get you to go to a room, and the men are saying, I just want to hang out here with my mates and pretend this is my harem. Why won't these women leave me alone? So that's the situation that this policy creates. This is really not a positive thing. You're not paid for cuddling or, yeah, just sitting there in a bikini next to some guy. I guess it's good that the interaction helped to humanize, but yeah, like I said, I am worried about these young women working in the brothels, even if they themselves are not sellers, because, well, it's an environment that's, risks grooming you into the same thing, unless you really maintain that mental division between yourself and the other women. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the women we saw in this video ended up in prostitution themselves, because it's a prime environment for that to happen.
Männer wollen einfach nur Stunden mit ihr verbringen, ohne irgendwas zu machen.
Also man braucht Menschenkenntnis.
Schon, ja. Und ein starkes Ich.
Braucht man auch Überwindung?
Ich denke schon, ja. Also Überwindung ist...
Den Job anzufangen, schon Überwindung.
Genau, es ist einfach so, dass es ja schon sehr intim in kürzester Zeit werden kann, nicht muss. Aber es gehört einfach auch, es ist eine ganz menschliche Reaktion, eine Hemmschwelle zu haben.
Yeah, I mean, we heard similar things from a different woman in an earlier video, so I'm not going to say that much on it, but yeah, I mean, that's the environment. It tells you to get over yourself. Just be a little more chill. Like, what's the big deal about being naked? Just get used to it. What's the big deal of a stranger who's the age of your dad or your granddad touching you? Just get over yourself a little bit. And you're going to be in an environment where lots of people, if you say, oh, I'm not sure about this, they tell you, well, that's what it was like for me at the beginning, and then I got used to it, and then it was okay. But we've already seen also indications of how, well, one of the coping mechanisms is dissociation. So yeah, you do learn to dissociate if you don't come with those skills already at hand, which you would be if you're a survivor of rape or child abuse, as is often the case. Oh yeah, by the way, a third of women in the German sex trade enter it underage. Just FYI. And another said experiences, non-commercialized sexual abuse as a minor. But yeah, the women all are in an environment that tells them to get over themselves and to not listen to their own reactions of disgust or fear. That's what sex trade survivor Rachel Moran said, who was one of the women who was first exploited as a minor. She said the skills that you need for prostitution is, learning not to cry when you're in pain and learning not to throw up when you're disgusted. And just, staying put with the guy and not letting him see how you really feel. And that's how some women sort of end up romanticizing that by saying, well, I have acting skills. But it's more like dissociation or self-denial skills that almost inevitably come with a heavy price to pay later on. And I don't blame women, because any one of us would develop those coping skills in those situations, but I'd hesitate to call them work skills and rather say, well, those are trauma reactions.
Oder zu sagen, so, jetzt laufe ich nackt. Jetzt sehen mich alle.
Die Männer, die den Club aufsuchen, nennen die unterschiedlichsten Gründe. Party feiern, gut essen und ja, natürlich auch die Frauen.
Oh, okay, so now we're gonna see some interviews with the Johns, and I was thinking that I'll save that for another video, for the next one. We're gonna watch the final 10 minutes where they're gonna be interviewing Johns. Well, I'm glad they get around to that and those men don't stay faceless, because they don't, well, maybe they will stay faceless, but at least not voiceless. Well, we'll see what they have to say. There's a very interesting project by German photographer Bettina Flittner, a photo series called Johns. She did another series called Women in Prostitution, so she sort of had both sides where she interviewed people. And she asked men why they buy sex. And their answers are pretty awful. They're like, oh, I want, really young women. Other women don't want anal sex. That's why I go to the brothel. I want to ejaculate in her face. I want to feel powerful. The moment that I fall in love with a woman at the brothel, I want to get her out of there. Yeah, we'll see if the answers of the Johns are going to be along the lines of, that kind of stuff, or if they're going to tell us they, go there for therapy or whatever. As we already heard, lots of men just want to cuddle. And yeah, any survivor I know sort of just has a bitter laugh when they hear that. Okay, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one, which I think is going to be the last one. Then the video is done.